Some of my ancestors probably swung by their necks, but none of them swung by their tails. Yeah. Now look, if you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know it had any kids. You sure can't prove it had different kids. And why would you think a bone you found in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do, which is produce something other than their kind? Hey, did you know chimpanzees are still having babies? Why don't they make another human and let's watch it this time? See, evolution only happens in the imagination, never in reality. Where does the Stone Age fit into the Bible? Well, I think right after the flood, people got off the ark and they faced a real hostile climate. Things had changed. Noah couldn't tell his grandson to go to the hardware store and get him a shovel. There were no hardware stores. You would have to make stone tools because that you can make pretty quick. It takes a while to dig the iron ore out of the ground and melt it down and make the steel tools. So meanwhile, you're going to starve to death. They probably had a Gilligan's Island situation for the first few generations. Just, a lot of smart folks with not much technology. You'd have to rebuild civilization. So they would make stone tools. And there are cultures today still making stone tools. I think during the time right after the flood, there would be an ice age lasting for several hundred years. We covered that on video 6. During that time, people would wander around following herds of animals, and you don't want to carry a pile of rocks with you. So you wait till you catch up with the herd, and then you make your tools right on the spot. You kill the animals and leave the tools behind. You follow the herd someplace else. That way you're not carrying 50 pounds of rocks with you. It's quicker to make a new one after you get there. So a lot of times they find these crude-looking instruments and they'll say, wow, this is an older society. No, these people are in a bigger hurry. That's what it means. And if they have really neat-looking arrowheads, they probably had more time to sit there and shape them. Nothing to do with intelligence. But not only were the people living longer before the flood, animals were living longer also, and growing much bigger, I believe. This is a hornless rhinoceros, 18 feet tall. Some people say, oh, that's a prehistoric animal. No, there's no such thing as prehistoric. Did you know that word was added to the dictionary about 100 years ago? I got some old dictionaries and looked up prehistoric. 1766, it wasn't there. No such thing as prehistoric. I got a dictionary from 1860. There was no prehistoric in there. There's no such thing as prehistoric. You see, there are things that are pre-flood, but that's not prehistoric. Pre-flood, things were different. I think there was a canopy of water that increased air pressure, which would make animals grow much larger, especially insects. See, insects are limited today on how big they can get based upon the fact that they don't have enough air to breathe. They breathe through their skin. Insects that grow in oxygen-rich waters grow 1,000 times heavier than their counterparts just because they can grow bigger and they have more oxygen. See, insects breathe through their skin. If an animal increases in size, its surface area to volume ratio drops off. As an animal gets smaller in size, the surface area compared to the volume increases. So insects that breathe through their skin simply can't get huge today. And yet fossil insects are found that are huge, like this dragonfly with a 50-inch wingspan. How'd you like to run into that at 70 miles an hour? You take the bug deflector and the windshield right off, right? You guys have cockroaches here in Wisconsin? You should come to Florida and see ours. We raise some in our museum. If you want to come down to our science center, hold one of our Madagascar hissing cockroaches. They get pretty good size. But did you know fossil cockroaches have been found that are 18 inches long? You didn't call Orkin in those days. You called the National Guard. Fossil centipede was found in Germany 8½ feet long. That's a big centipede. Fossil grasshoppers have been found 2 feet long. You could eat them puppies. Fossil tarantula, 3-foot leg span. Fossil cattails have been found 60 feet tall. Fossil donkey found in Texas, 9 feet high at the shoulder. Everything's bigger in Texas. Fossil buffalo horns have been found, indicating buffalo used to get huge. Show me a home where that buffalo roams. I'll show you a wreck. Deer antlers, 12-foot span. Some of you hunters are thinking, wow. How many folks here go try to shoot Bambi's daddy? Come on now, let me see. There we go. And eat them too. Amen. All right, good. Kangaroo fossils have been found that are 10 feet tall. Wombats the size of a mini little car. They found in a prehistoric goose stood as tall as an elephant and weighed half a ton. That's a big goose. Fossil beavers have been found 8 feet long. Right here in Wisconsin, a guy found a beaver jaw over in Johnson Creek, Wisconsin. I met the guy, there's his phone number, Jim Erb. He said, yeah, that beaver would have been 7 or 8 feet long. That's a big beaver. In Ohio, a 6-foot beaver skeleton was found. I think before the flood, the trees were bigger, which means you need bigger beavers to chew them down. Probably just about everything was bigger back in those days. Salamanders got 6 feet long. Greater air pressure from the canopy would also increase the amount of oxygen getting into the water, which means now more fish can survive, because fish have to breathe air underwater through their gills. Well, increasing air pressure diffuses more gas into the water. A shark, here I'm holding a shark's jaw that I got in Hawaii, that shark was probably about 12 feet long. If a tooth of a shark is 1 inch long, the shark was about 15 feet. Kind of a rough average, depending on species, of course. I've got a replica here on the table of a fossil shark's tooth, indicating sharks before the flood probably got 80 feet long. Now, the movie Jaws had a 25-foot great white. Folks, you'd have to use Jaws for bait to catch a Carcharodon megalodon. I think things were a little bigger before the flood. Much bigger, actually. Carl Baugh in Texas is raising piranha in a pressurized chamber with increased electromagnetic field, trying to simulate pre-flood conditions. His fish are getting 4 times the size of normal. Call him up or go visit his place in Glen Rose, Texas. If you're ever driving across Texas, you might as well stop, because there's nothing else to see as you drive across Texas. Turtles got to be huge. That's a big turtle. On the left. Oyster shells were found in the top of the mountains in Peru, 2 miles above sea level. Some of the oyster shells were 11.5 feet wide. 500 petrified oysters. You should see the pearls. Now, did you know petrified clams in the closed position are found all over the world? I've got one here on the table. These kind are found on top of Mount Everest. I would like to point out, Your Honor, Mount Everest is a little ways from the beach. Secondly, clams do not climb mountains very well. Thirdly, when a clam dies, it opens. You can walk along the beach and find a million seashells. You hardly ever find a matched pair. The only way to get one closed and petrified would be to have him buried alive. Now, I don't think the water was over Mount Everest. I think Mount Everest was under the water. Big difference. Psalm 104 says, during the last part of the flood, the mountains arose, the valley sank down, the water rushed off. We'll cover more on that on video 6. You know, fossilized birds have been found, 13 feet tall. How'd you like to have that for Thanksgiving dinner? And lizards got huge. Did you know reptiles grow all their life? They never stop growing. I think before the flood, when people lived to be 900, the reptiles would get to be really big. Really big. I think dinosaurs were big lizards that lived with Adam and Eve. The word dinosaur means terrible lizard. And that would be a terrible lizard if it's about 80 feet long. You can buy these at the pet store today. It's called a Jackson chameleon. Got 3 horns on his face. I bet something similar to that, if you let it live 900 years, it'd get to be a triceratops. Now, I don't think today's lizards would grow to be dinosaurs if you let them live long enough. I think there's been any more than, you could take all the Chihuahuas today and crossbreed them and end up with a Great Dane. I think it's just the genes for largeness are gone for whatever reason. But I think they're certainly in the same family of animals. Dinosaur means terrible lizard. Dinosaur and human bones have been found together in Peru, in South America, several different places, and in South Carolina, and in Texas, and in Brazil, and in Russia. Human hands and dinosaur bones found in the same rock strata. Dinosaur and mammal remains found together, according to New Scientist magazine, February of 2001. The Ica stones in Peru show humans and dinosaurs together. We've got pictures right here. if you want to get some of the articles about the Ica stones, or go to our website, drdino.com. There's quite a bit of information about the Ica stones. There are about 20 of those in America. Now, we've got 3 of them in our museum, 3 of the actual Ica stones. They're real expensive to get out of the country down there in Peru, but a rich guy bought 3 of them, donated them to our museum. Said, yay, we'll take them. In Glen Rose, Texas, south of Dallas, that's where Dr. Ball's museum is, south of Fort Worth, they've got a river running through town called the Paluxy River. Back in 1908, the river flooded, and it got so bad, it ripped off the bottom of the river, which was solid limestone, sort of like concrete almost. It ripped off a 2-foot layer of limestone and moved it 20 miles downstream. Underneath was another layer of limestone, so it's no big deal. But that layer underneath contained hundreds of dinosaur footprints. They actually made a state park out of it. I've got the book right here, Dinosaur Valley State Park. If you want to come take a look at some of the pictures. They chiseled out lots of the tracks because they knew erosion would tear them up over the next 20, 30 years, would destroy them. They moved a lot of the tracks to museums. They cut out big blocks of stone and moved them and set them up under dinosaur skeletons. So it looks like the dinosaur just walked there. Some of the tracks are pretty big. Here's a kid taking a bath in one. Right next to the dinosaur tracks, frequently they found human footprints. Roland Bird was in charge of the group of guys digging out the tracks, and he reported there were 15 to 20 inch long, clearly defined human footprints with the dinosaur tracks. Human tracks and dinosaur tracks together? Hundreds of dinosaur track sites have been found around the world. Finding dinosaur tracks is not that unusual. Many have been found. There's some in Holyoke, Massachusetts, some in Connecticut. They found Colorado on Red Rock Amphitheater's got a bunch of dinosaur tracks. But to find human tracks with them is pretty unusual. In 1884, a geologist named Flint was working for the Peabody Museum and Harvard University. Down in Nicaragua, he discovered a layer containing fossilized human tracks, 16 to 24 feet below the surface. He described the tracks in 1884 and said these footprints are from 1/2 to 3 inches in depth, and none exceeded 18 inches. You can read the whole description for yourself on our website about the tracks found in Nicaragua. Human tracks are found. But now, museums are real careful about mentioning anything about this because that might support the creation view. So stuff kind of gets squelched or hidden on this topic now. But human tracks with dinosaur tracks have been found a few times. There's some pictures here if you want to see a trail of human tracks crossing a trail of dinosaur tracks. This is the Taylor Trail from Glen Rose, Texas. I've been there 4 times. Talked to many folks who studied it. Carl Ball lives there, studied it avidly. People say, how can you have human tracks together? Well, one of the best human tracks still had the dermal ridges, like the fingerprints on the toes. You could see them. They were extremely clear for the first few months. And once it gets exposed, it starts to dry out and weather, and pretty soon it starts to become a little less clear, and then pretty soon it's nothing but an oval. And over time, it turned into a 3-toed dinosaur track. And some of the creationist groups have backed off talking about the Paluxy tracks because they say, well, maybe they were just dinosaur tracks all along. Well, no. A human stepped in where the dinosaur track was. That's the logical place to walk when you're following somebody through the mud or through the snow. You step where they already walked. You folks get snow up here? You know about snow, right? Okay. Yeah, you walk where somebody else already walked. They did the work for you. So no, I think they really were human tracks. Here's one inside a dinosaur track right there. Logical place to step. There's a good book about it called Texas Tracks and Artifacts if you want to get more information on the human and dinosaur tracks together. We sell castings of one of the human tracks. It's a size 24. Check our catalog. You can get one of those for hang on your wall in your office. That'll start a conversation. You can steer that conversation toward creation. We had a kid with a size 18 tried to fill up our 24 track, couldn't quite do it. They chiseled out some of the rock ledges and said, we think the tracks are fake, some of the skeptics did. When they removed the rock, they found more tracks underneath the undisturbed limestone. And they said, okay, who made these tracks anyway, under the rock here? They sawed one of the tracks across the toes. Looking at it endways, you could see there were depressions where the toes had squeezed the mud down, distorting the lamination lines. These are not carved in, they're not erosion marks, they're compression prints, quite obviously. There's much more on that on the website omniology.com. The man's stride between steps was about 6 or 7 feet. I would rip my britches every time trying to do that. How do you get human tracks and dinosaur tracks together?